for me it is a new learning curve, and I am delighted with what I've been learning. I have to say, there are moments when I'm overwhelmed by the whole thing, especially with Cooley's. The next thing is I've got to deal with child sex abuse and so on. In all my life in the tourism industry, I've never come across one incident of this, which shows that I've obviously been going to the wrong places. So, now let me not lose my way. I haven't got a speech written here. I've got a set of speech notes, and it gives me a great deal of flexibility. I also want to compliment the two other proposals, the mining sector proposal and so on, and they will be extremely valuable to us. I have to point out that our entry into this process is very fast. I got the invitation to submit a bid less than a week ago, and I'm doing it together with Daniel Stiles from Kenya. I don't know if any of you know Daniel Stiles. He's been, what should we say, rattling the cage a bit recently. He published a thing on saying, how long can elephants survive a continued ivory trade ban? And he's just published another thing saying that, I think the title of the article is Trade or No Trade, and he gives a very convincing argument that if you want to keep elephants, you're going to have to get involved in the trade. And I've just done a big project with him looking at the illegal flows of ivory out of Africa to the Far East. And one realizes that as much precision as you'd like to add to the process, you're not going to be able to, because, and it's something that I think international treaties like CITES and so on don't appreciate, is the minute you make things illegal, that's the end of your data. You no longer can get the data. Early studies on the ivory trade used to go to the customs and go and get the statistics from the stuff being exported, and they were precise. Now, everybody guesses. Everybody does what I do, produce simulation models that fit the scenario. But how valid they are is another story. I noticed that the other two sectors, the proposals are very much supported by institutions, and whereas Daniel Stiles and myself are two lone rangers, and I'm somewhat envious of the ones in institutions, but I wonder also whether there won't be a few illegal financial flows between the institution and the project. Now, the time frames for these projects vary significantly. The mining proposal is about a 1-year project. The agriculture is a 1.5 years, and along come Stiles and Martin and think that they're going to crack it all in 3 to 4 months. And so I think this must be a topic to discuss. What I seek out of this is a little bit of flexibility. In other words, you're not going to drop the portcullis on me as if I haven't delivered by a certain date, which is what I've had on this last consultancy, is literally to the hour. You've got to deliver by this date. I think there's a great deal of scope for collaboration and talk between us. In fact, Masiga has pointed out that most of our proposal seems to focus on criminal activities. Now, that may be because of what we've just been doing. And I have to say that so many of these criminal activities may well not be, well, let me lose my place. I feel that right from the beginning, we're going to have to decide on the scope of what we're looking at, and I think Kooley has highlighted that very well. In many ways, we may need a cut-off. Having seen these statistics, like God knows how many billion going out in IFFs, we need to say we won't include things which are less than a certain amount of money because they're not worth looking at compared to the bigger things. The other thing is we've got to decide on the scope in the wildlife thing, just how far we go with looking at the overall species trade, which is being looked at all around the world by CITES, the World Conservation Monitoring Center, Traffic, the Trade Records Analysis, and Flora and fauna in commerce. So Léonce gave a very good piece of advice, and he said, don't do work which other people have already gone as far as they can with. I'm critical of a lot of the work, because whenever I pick up their reports and so on, and I'm looking for particular data like prices, they're woefully deficient in that they, again, because things are illegal, they don't know what the prices are. But don't do other people's work for them. So we will be extremely careful about that and seek areas where we can bring original stuff to the table. I like the statement in the mining sector proposal that IFFs are a multi-level and dynamic challenge, and I see this, whatever you do, it's a snapshot in time, unless you're lucky enough to have long data sequences, which you do have in agriculture. Just back to Masiga's observations, one reasons why criminal activities seem to dominate the wildlife business is because the world made it that way. You know, it has, where the sovereign rights over what you do in your mining sector and agriculture are pretty good. The sovereign rights of what you can do in your wildlife sector are being determined. The conservation agenda is being set from the Northern Hemisphere. It's influencing trade bans, it's influencing, I mean, just take what's going on in the news at the moment. Baby elephants being exported to China, the whole world goes up in uproar. They don't mind if genocide knocks off a few hundred people here or there, but move a baby elephant and you're in trouble. The Cecil the lion is hitting the front spots on BBC television. It's a storm in a teacup. It's not even interesting. But it's not doing Zimbabwe's image very much good. But most of the illegal stuff that's taking place, the illegal hunting, poaching, illegal is a matter of definition. You know, it's only breaking a law. And some of these laws wouldn't look too damn good in common law. They may be things that have materialized in international treaties, but really we're getting to the stage now where these treaties are a long way from sensible common law. You take ivory and rhino horn as part of Africa's wealth, and has been for centuries. The colonial powers went to war over ivory. America was one of the biggest players in the ivory trade. It had posts all along West Africa exporting stuff to New York, Boston, and so on. Now they are holier than thou and righteous beyond belief. But I thought I would just, I mean, this wealth that we have got in Africa could easily bring about the transformation that we seek on the poverty side of things, because I'll come to it a little further down. The land use values of elephants and rhino horn dwarf the returns you can get from land from agriculture. Now, the agriculturists don't want to hear that, so we need to collaborate with the agriculturists. But I'm working with community rhino farms in South Africa, where we're looking at returns round about, not with illegal rhino horn trade, of 3,000, 4,000 US dollars per hectare. Take tobacco, take wheat, take irrigated maize. We're talking hundreds of US dollars per hectare from that. With rhino horn, you're talking thousands of US dollars per hectare. With ivory, the price in ivory has tripled in the last 3 years, and although it's going through a bit of a stagnation right this very minute as I speak, but the wealth that is in the elephants of Africa is enormous. But I refer to that we don't make our own agenda, and this is what makes this wildlife sector and tourism different to the others, is, am I going on too long? No, it's all right, I'll go. I've only got another page. I'd like to read you the United States strategy towards sub-Saharan Africa, released by the White House in June 2012, and I'm reading it. America believes in Africa as a region of growing opportunity and promise for Africa, for America, and for our people and our economies. We believe that Africa can be the world's next major economic success story. We will work with our African partners to build strong institutions, to remove constraints to trade and investment, and to expand opportunities for African countries to effectively access each other's markets and global markets, to embrace sound economic governance and diversity, and diversify their economies beyond a narrow reliance on natural resources. And most importantly, I don't like that. You know, it's sort of saying natural resources, there's something wrong with your civilization if you're relying on natural resources. Rubbish. And most importantly, create opportunities for Africa's people to prosper. Now, all of this is laudable. It heralds an era of cooperation, partnership, and prosperity. The US comes across as a powerful and insightful partner, collaborative but not coercive. However, President Obama's executive order combating wildlife trafficking on the 1st of July last year, and the recent ban on trophy imports from Tanzania and Zimbabwe to the United States projects a different image, that of an enforcer prepared unilaterally to use its privileged position to enforce its own perspectives. There appear to be two USAs. The one is developmentalist and the other is imperialist. And I have to say this extends to Europe as well, this type of thinking. The London Convention and so on are all, there's a serious scale mismatch between the global institutions governing the management of elephants and ivory and the de facto management of elephants in Africa. And the principle of subsidiarity may provide the guidance for development of appropriate levels of decision-making and management of elephants at regional, national, right down to local levels. That principle of subsidiarity, in case you don't know, was first enunciated by Pope Leo X in 15-something or other, and it holds that it is a grave injustice and evil for higher bodies to arrogate to themselves the decisions that would be better taken by people at lower levels. I paraphrased it, it's slightly shorter than that. I mentioned the differences between agriculture, mining, and wildlife. Humans have evolved a sort of basic toolbox about how they cope with the exigencies of daily living. They follow the basic principles of commerce, and they have conditioned responses to a wide range of stimuli. Yet, we're frequently expected to abandon this toolbox when considering conservation, and it has done no favour to the cause of conservation that the use of wild animals and their environments has been placed in a special category that departs from conventional manner in which people handle their day-to-day decisions. For local people to make rational decisions about the use of natural resources, they need to operate on a level playing field, and the conditions affecting their use of wildlife should be no different to the conditions affecting their use of cattle. This is a choice about how you use land, and it's being biased and driven in the wrong directions. And I said earlier, and it's here, I think that we need a lot of collaboration between the agriculture sector and ourselves on the land use issues here. For the last 5 years, I've been collecting data on land use. What are the more profitable forms of land use and the more user-friendly forms of land use? Interestingly enough, the highest valued land use that I found for wildlife up until recently was using domesticated elephants. Domesticated elephants in this country, up at the Victoria Falls, are producing a land use return higher than $1,000 and perhaps up to $2,000 per hectare. Now compare that to any agricultural thing. Unfortunately, that's not extrapolatable to the country as a whole. It needs a huge tourist throughput. The rhino horn thing is very different. Now we're looking at land use values up in the, depending And again, because it's illegal, we're not sure what the final prices would be in a market, but probably nothing under 10,000 US dollars a kilogram for rhino horn. And this translates to $5,000 to $10,000 per hectare in the returns that you can get from land in poor soils with poor rainfall, at low, semi-arid savanna ecosystems. And yet we bury that and continue to follow the land use practices which have got us into so much trouble so far. I mean, some of Cooley's observations are there. But we have an imperative running in the region, and that is self-sufficiency in food in our countries. This has done us no favour. A country like Botswana has no agricultural potential, and yet it insists on playing around with little projects here and there to make agriculture when their wealth is around them all the time. In the Kikuyu homelands in Kenya, the density of people has reached such high levels that they've got rid of the roads between the houses, that they feed the cattle in stalls, the children bring the food to the cattle in stalls, and there are very few food crops that they grow. They grow much more valuable crops, including hardwood timbers, and as they told me when I was up there, we let those dummies in Tanzania grow the crops. We buy their food from them, but we plant things that are valuable. And that is probably how we ought to be seeing this food self-sufficiency thing. So far I have not outlined any methodology, and our thoughts on this, what you have done is given me a great deal to go away and think about. And this is what Daniel and I will be doing for the first week or so. I've been lucky enough to collect presentations, and I've got your very good proposals, and we've now got to start from scratch and see how we tackle this with a new lens. This is a lens that hasn't been used elsewhere that I'm aware of. I think Cooley perhaps introduced it, and that is, the title of our thing is Wildlife and Tourism. What we're going to find is they're very, very different things. The wildlife thing is going to focus mainly on commodity values from wildlife. The tourism one is, again, selling the myth of Africa, along with the sex and the children and so on, but which I rather hope is rubbish. Or rather, Ben, you're going to tell me that it isn't rubbish, that it's big business. Never heard of it. The tourism one is going to be guilty of all of the transfer pricing, all of the false invoicing, all the things that we've heard so well described on the other sectors. Fortunately, I know most of the crooks in the business, and I am sufficiently friendly with them that I think we've got a clear entry into it. And they'll tell me how it works and how many of them are doing it and which are the worst culprits. And that'll give us a good lead in to start examining some of these things. But in the end, what I'm conscious of the high-level thoughts that Masego and Briggs have brought to this whole process, and we would like to be able to focus on the high-level fundamental principles that guide human behavior, and I'll bring it out in the presentation I'm about to do. And I must say, I was absolutely staggered at the figures that you produced, in billions involved in these illegal transfer funds. I've gone on long enough. I've got 6 slides to show you, which you may enjoy. And they're not original for this project. The background to this presentation is I was asked by the European Union Sustainable Use Specialist Group to present a proposal for them. And I do that because they pay highly. And now, have I got my tools here? So this proposal was presented at the 8th World, at the World Conservation Congress in Barcelona, Catholic stronghold, but also the home of Salvador Dali. and suddenly we have communities out of that face. And as Kool-Aid pointed out, I've had a lot to do with developing community programs. I'm working with community rhino farms, and I did the campfire program in Zimbabwe, and which is not doing very well. I use Salvador Dali because he came from Barcelona, and so I've got quite a few pictures of him. Now, what the Europeans told me at the start of this is that Europe sees conservation as equal to protection. That is what the recipe is. I was lucky enough to work under a remarkable man, Archie Fraser in Zimbabwe, the one who came up with our very, very liberal, devolved system which made Zimbabwe so strong. We were a force to be reckoned with in international treaties. And I thought other countries were like us, and it took me several CITES meetings before I realized just how different we were, in the way that Archie Fraser said that legislation never saved a species yet. He also said, make it easy to be legal. And if someone comes to you for a permit, give it to them, because otherwise they won't come anymore. So he had different things. So attempting to remove the commercial value from a species will not lead to its conservation. It will disappear through neglect. So all species should have value. When the European Union gave me this project, they said, you've got 6 slides and you've got to make 3 recommendations at the end of it. I love that one about Salvador Dali at the age of 6, thinking he was a girl. There are limits to the number of state-protected areas that can be created to conserve wildlife. And outside protected areas, ecosystems will only be conserved by the people living with them. And it won't happen unless there is considerable rights devolved to local people. I only know of one case. On Zimbabwe private land in 1975, there was total devolution. And it was a very enlightened decision. Unfortunately, the government has removed that devolution from private land. It was done on communal land a few years later. Now the government has taken back all its powers, and now it has a hostile community threatening resources all over the place who are fed up. They don't want anything more to do with the present programs. And the cases that I've looked at in neighboring countries are all cases of aborted devolution. And devolution is one of these things, you either go the whole hog and it works, but don't think that you can hold people in a state of limbo where when they perform better, then we will give them full devolution. That full devolution is a prerequisite for performance. They've got to have the right and authority from the start. What I've found is that ownership of wildlife resources by the state dominates conservation policy worldwide. But everywhere in Africa where it's been practiced, Kenya is a wonderful example, it's a disaster. The state can't look after its own wildlife, never mind the wildlife on the lands around it. And so I react badly every time I hear a statement that the wildlife belongs to the state. And power, bureaucracy, and corruption explain the failure to devolve rights over natural resources. But now we need that devolution to enable people to adapt to massive global changes, which Kool-Aid referred to in the climate change issues, and I've added that for this slideshow, and reduce illicit financial flows. It's not going to happen if the local people are in charge of the resource in wildlife. Empowering local people doesn't solve all the problems. Conservation is a complex systems problem, and that's one thing I'm not hearing in the presentations and so on, is the current science of complex systems. Kool-Aid brought it out. And I like Kool-Aid's idea of think about resilience, although I've recently reviewed some projects studying resilience, and oh boy, a difficult one. To define resilience and measure it is a very difficult one. But we're looking at a complex adaptive system with issues of scale, uncertainty, and multiple stability domains. And the social systems are multi-level, with institutions needed at various levels of organization, from local to international, but it must be built up from the bottom. People and ecosystems are inextricably linked in complex social ecological systems, which do not allow simple blueprint solutions for their conservation. And these were the recommendations that I made. First of all, recognize the value of species. Secondly, we got it. Devolve authority to the lowest accountable level. You can scale up from the lowest accountable level. Thirdly, build multi-level institutions. But I've said that. There we are. And that's it. And I didn't think it was appropriate to put that slide in, but all my friends all said, "Oh, come on, you've got to put it in." Thank you. Thank you, Masika. I haven't really answered.